Podcasting from a little cabin on a hill. This is the Stacy Westfall podcast. Stacy's goal is simple: to teach you to understand why horses do what they do, as well as the action steps for creating clear, confident communication with your horses.
Hello, I'm Stacy Westfall, and I teach people how to understand, enjoy, and successfully train their own horses. In this first season of the podcast, I've been discussing issues that frequently affect the way that riders think. As I wrap up this season and prepare for season 2, I'd like to address a few more topics that I really see affecting riders. Things that riders can and should contemplate while they're sitting on the couch, because it's really going to change the way that you ride. In today's episode, I'm discussing a single word: pressure. This word is often combined in the equine world with the word release, but for today, I want you to think just about your reaction to the word pressure. When I say the word pressure, and especially when I don't combine it with release, when I say the word pressure, what are some of the pictures that flash into your mind? What is your very first reaction when I combine the word pressure and horse in the same sentence? Now I'm going to play a little bit of a game with you, and I'm going to say that when I was asking myself this question, I actually went outside the horse world because I'm in there so often, and I thought, what's my very first reaction to the word pressure? And because I've been watching The Good Doctor, my very first reaction to the word pressure was, put some pressure on that cut before he bleeds out. Which is interesting because in that case, pressure is actually helpful. And I thought about it a little bit more, and I thought another place where we hear the word pressure used is pressure creates diamonds. But we also hear it used as in he cracked under the pressure. I'm sure that I could search around and try to figure out a prettier word to use in this discussion. But when I thought about it and started even doing some Google searches to figure out some other words that might sit better with everyone out there who's listening, I thought, why am I hiding this word pressure? Because I actually believe that pressure is a natural part of life. I just posted a video on YouTube, and it is the very first podcast. But what I did was, because it was going on YouTube, I wanted to put footage with it. So I put footage of 3 of my horses playing in the round pen. So if you want to get a kick out of it, you can go over onto the Stacy Westfall YouTube channel, and you can actually you're going to listen to the first podcast episode again, but you're going to be watching 3 horses playing. And if you watch it, one thing I would say is you're watching an entire game of pressure. And you'll see that 2 out of the 3 are distinctly playing the game of pressure, while the older horse is sort of much more subtly showing how he uses pressure. But I'm going to let you go enjoy that little piece of footage on your own over there. What I hope you see when you look at it is that horses aren't afraid of pressure, and that it's really a world that we're trying to create for them a lot of times that's not real, this pressure-free life. A lot of times I see riders who are trying to shape the world around their horses to be a pressure-free zone. But inside of that, we run into a whole bunch of problems. Number one being that you might be able to create that bubble inside of a closed environment, like a small indoor arena with very little activity, but it's not a realistic view of the world. It's not a realistic view of our world. It's pretty easy for all of you to admit that there's pressure in your life. And it's really not a very realistic view of a horse's world either if we want to put them out in nature. You could do a YouTube search and watch herds of horses, and again, you're going to see something similar to what's going on in the round pen footage, where there's pressure. inside the herds. You put them out in the wild, there's pressure coming from externally. And I think sometimes when we don't think about how we as individual humans interact with the word pressure, what happens is that we carry over this negative idea of pressure into our riding. And we're definitely going to be addressing that a lot more when we get into the upcoming seasons. But I want to touch it here and now in the mental sense. A picture that you could have in your mind as we discuss this is that if we look at how muscle is built, there is a form of pressure in the form of resistance that is what builds muscle. And I'm proposing that it is a form of pressure that builds a horse's mind. I will be the first to admit that the same way that pressure can break a horse or a person down physically, you can absolutely break a horse down mentally if you apply pressure wrong. But that's the same thing as saying that you can apply pressure wrong to their body. In neither case is the option of avoiding pressure a good option. If we avoid pressure in the form of building their muscles, they become weaker. I'm proposing the idea that if we avoid pressure in the realm of mental and this physical crossover that we're about to discuss, that you're actually weakening the horse instead of strengthening them. I know at the moment this still seems a little bit, foofy, a little bit out in the clouds for me. So I want to bring it down to an actual thing that we can actually picture and even feel the next time that either of us goes out and rides. In practice, a place that people often struggle with the idea of pressure, even if they're not completely aware that that's the word they're struggling with, would be inside of the idea of having contact on the horse's reins. The reason I believe a lot of people have a lot of resistance to the idea of holding or maintaining contact is because they haven't broken down their actual thoughts on pressure. I was on Facebook and I followed Denny Emerson, and you can find him at Tamarack Hill Farms, Tamarack, Hill Farm. And he wrote this post at the end of December that I thought was so good that I would rather share it here than try to rephrase it. And he wrote, "Contact also depends on context. The degree of contact needed for control varies according to several factors. These 9 photos," and so he talks a little bit about the 9 photos that are in this post, "the relaxed horse in the last 3 frames can go on 0 contact because she feels equally 0 urgency. But if I had 0 contact on the galloping horse, it would be a completely different result. The contact in a dressage test is somewhere in the middle. If someone tells you that a correctly schooled horse should go in all circumstances on feather-light contact, send that person fox hunting and see what happens when the horse is galloping down a slope with 11 other horses next to it, a 3-rail vertical post and rail fence coming up fast. There is a nice theory and there is a cold reality, and they are not always the same thing, as anyone with any degree of experience will have learned." End of the quote. What I like about the way that Denny wrote this is that it absolutely does depend on context. And I believe that the bareback bridleless ride that I did with Roxy has accidentally pointed people to the belief that it was created without pressure. And I am here to say that Roxy fully understood contact and fully understood galloping and me being able to wrap my legs around her and hug her and being able to hold pressure on the bit. And she understood leverage bits and different things. And in understanding them, not only did they not scare her, but they helped her to understand pressure. pressure as a theory is not just a theory for people, but it can become a theory and principle for horses. As Roxy understood the theory that most of us understand when we flap a plastic bag, that we want to teach that horse that pressure is not something to run from. That's a theory we're teaching the horse. Not all of these scary things are actually danger. But we can also teach the horse that we can wrap our aids around the horse, that we can hold that horse's proverbial hand by holding contact with the reins. We can shape the horse and we can wrap our legs around and we can hold the horse. And these aren't scary things. They don't have to be scary things. But before that is going to happen with the horse, you have to believe it in your mind. There is a simple exercise that everyone, the next time they get on a horse, can do. And the simple exercise, simple but not easy, simple exercise is to take the slack out of the reins and simply see if you can find the rhythm that horse's head has when it walks. When a horse walks, doesn't matter if it's a gaited horse or a stock horse, when a horse walks, their head wants to move up and down, slightly forward and back. The next time you're leading a horse, or go ahead and watch the ones playing in the round pen, you're going to see this movement in their head and neck. And I want you to get on and I want you to see if you can simply teach your hand to follow that motion. So that means that you could hold with 1 ounce of pressure. If that's what you're comfortable with, take the slack out just to where there's that, and follow that horse's head movement with your hand. Because your ability to do this will make you pleasant to hold hands with. And we're going to discuss a lot more of these ideas of how you can train your body in the next season of the podcast. But if you're sitting on the couch or you're driving in your car and you're picturing the idea of taking the slack out of the reins and following that horse's head as it nods up and down a little bit at the walk, I need you to analyze your thought belief around that idea. Because if you have a tenseness in your body, if you feel upset about the idea of contact, if you feel like you're doing damage to the horse, in your mind, before you're even near your horse, you won't have a good result. And it won't be because it's a bad practice. It will be because it might not be the right one for you right now at the time in your life. But I will say that I do truly believe it is one of the keys to higher level riding. When I want to be inspired, I do a Google search and watch the horse named Valegro, Valegro, and Charlotte Desjardins. It is a beautiful, beautiful ride of an Olympic level dressage horse. And you can see all the contact that this rider has with the bridle reins, with her legs, and all the understanding that horse has. I know that Roxy had this understanding. I know that you had an understanding of pressure when you were learning to drive a car, and that when you go out and drive on the road, you have to handle a degree of pressure. I know that I had to teach my kids to understand pressure when they were learning to drive cars, because you have to advance in life, be able to understand and handle degrees of pressure. Guys, I know that I'm going to start going deeper into some of these thoughts on what it takes to move your understanding of horses. If you have questions that you'd like to have answered here on the podcast, I would love it if you would leave me a voicemail question over at stacywestfall.com. I hope this gives you lots of things to think about, and thanks again for listening.
If you enjoy listening to Stacy's podcast, please visit stacywestfall.com for articles, videos, and tips to help you and your horse succeed.